Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I appreciate it. This week I'm going to continue with a bit of a metallics pour that is a continuation of last week's. If you haven't had a chance to take a look, I'll leave a link in the description below to take a quick look when you can. Anyhow, I've got some great colors on deck today. I've got some ivory black, some really nice copper, metallic silver by Artist Loft, and lastly, my new favorite is the metallic cobalt blue. Now this week I'm working with a bit of a black base, which is my ivory black by Artist Loft. I really enjoy this color for the sake of this type of swipe, which will include some brighter colors, and I feel like this black will complement those brighter colors really well, which is why I chose it. Now also with this pour, I'm working on a bigger canvas than typical for me. It's a 24-inch by 12-inch canvas, which is quite a bit bigger than what I'm used to, so this paint's taken a little while to stretch out like I want to, but we'll get there. Okay, here we go. So as I move into a bit of a fast forward through to the black base, I've mixed up some metallic silver, which I think is one of my, not my favorite metallic, but it certainly is a nice color once mixed. So I added about 1 ounce of Floetrol to about 2 ounces of paint and pouring medium as well for consistency. Now my plan was to layer these across the canvas, so I started with the silver leading into my copper here, which is a really pretty color. Now also the copper has about 1 ounce of Floetrol to 2 ounces paint, and also mixed for consistency with my pouring medium. I also didn't want to saturate the silver with too much color like this copper, which is quite dark on its own, so I decided to do a thin bead over top, going back and forth, which worked out well. And I wanted to use my cobalt blue as my last color, knowing it was the brightest of the three, but also the color I wanted to have stick out the most on this pour. And a quick look at my consistency for how I mix my paint, which is a small bead as it falls back into the cup. Now with this cobalt blue, I wanted to be very careful with how much paint I first initially put on this canvas, because this cobalt blue is quite bright and I felt like it could overtake the entire painting real quick, so I want to go back and do a second bead later on if necessary after this initial pour, because again I was too concerned that the blue would just take over the entire thing. Okay, now here's where things get interesting. I promise you there are stories behind this pour, so bear with me. I'm showing a swipe tool that I got from a pour artist. Her name is Tracy, and I'll link below when I'm through here. But this swipe tool is great for specific pours. Now I gave it a shot on this long swipe across the pour diagonally. Now as you can see, it's doing okay, but I felt like I just began to muddy things up and I really wasn't happy with how things were going. And I thought, okay, I'll give this one more try because I've got to get this small little bead of paint at the bottom swiped across as best I can. But again, I was in my mind was in a bit of a fog, thinking how am I going to recover from how poor I thought this swipe actually was. Not Tracy's fault, her swipe tool is amazing, but my pour technique, or sorry, my swipe technique was not good at all. Now as I try to figure out in my mind as I do this second bead of silver how I'm going to fix that initial pour, I needed some paint to fill the void of the negative space in the ivory black with some more color. So again, the silver, my copper, and then my cobalt blue coming up in the end here. Using again a small bead of paint for each color, just filling that space to make sure that there's color where I needed it. Now let me know in the comments below what your guys' favorite metallic colors are. I'm very curious and I may use some going forward in some future videos. So again, let me know. Okay, now on this second swipe, I'm going to be using my palette knife, which I'm much more familiar with on swipes, and I figure this may work out much better. And as you can see, the Floetrol mix with my Amsterdam white began to make my lacing in cells, which I was really hoping for in the first swipe, beautifully, so I was quite happy with that and it worked out great. Now I knew I needed one more row at the top of the painting for some more color, so I decided to layer one more row of my silver, my copper, and my blue, again to fill that negative space at the top, my bottom, as I look at it, as I paint it, on this painting. Now I did have some comments last week on my previous pour that some of you have used iridescent colors in the past or even in your current pouring lives, but also some pigments. I'm curious if any of you use pigments and how you may use them, but also if you can let me know your secret on how they work within your pours as I wrap up some color here on this painting. So here I am just dropping some more cobalt blue into the middle where I think I really messed this up. And again, I'm not feeling very good about how my middle looks, so I wanted to add some more color before swiping towards myself on this row of color, filling in some space. And here I think that the swipe turned out okay. I do feel like I did bury some of the color into the black, so my swipe wasn't quite as good as I'd hoped for, and I figured that the middle needed a teeny bit more blue to help emphasize some of that color. And again, I joke every week we learn something new, so after what I felt was a big miscue in the beginning, I wanted to make sure that this middle portion had a lot of color. Having stepped back, looking at it, comparing the smaller swipes to the middle, wanting to get some more blue and some copper into the middle, trying to spread this out a little bit, not too much, and just a teeny bit with some more of my cell activator with my titanium white and some Floetrol to create a little bit of lacing, plus just to get some swipe color into that middle portion. Now as I begin to lift this canvas up and realize how incredibly heavy it was, I knew immediately I had about at least 12 ounces of paint, maybe more, on this canvas, and it was going to spread really weird, really fast. So what I'm trying to accomplish here is spreading out my lacing and my cells as best I can without dumping too much paint off the sides right away. So again, moving this back and forth and side to side a little bit at a time here, try not to tilt over too much paint off the edges because I want to maintain some of that color and consistency I made from those swipes off the hop. Okay, now here's where some learning for myself comes back into play again every week. We learn something. I've gone ahead and this is actually time-lapsed by about 2 times speed for the past 6 or 7 minutes. I do this back and forth for around 5 minutes total time. I needed to get a little bit aggressive with what I was doing and begin to tilt off some paint. I realized I was going to wind up probably tilting off that great lacing at the bottom and the top, but I did have to make a decision on how much time I spent going back and forth, getting the same result before needing to spill some paint off the sides. Now I remember looking down on the paint as I began to do this particular tilt, realizing I was going to bury and just make a mess of that really nice lacing I made earlier on in my swipe on the top, and it was going to fall off the side. So tears were cried, many tears, but anyway, we'll move on from that. As I continued with the tilt and the movement of the paint, I actually didn't mind how this looked. So I decided to keep going and go a bit more slow to see how things could pan out. Now before I forget, if you have enjoyed this video, please hit that like button to help this video spread to more people who may enjoy it. Thanks again, I appreciate it. I would also love to hear any comments or feedback on how this pour turned out. How do you guys like the metallic look? With the copper, the blue, the silver, and the white titanium, how does it look? Let me know. Anyway, as I wrap up this pour here, I was actually running out of paint, so I had to make a choice on what to do going forward to finish up. So I decided to do one more pour, actually one more tilt forward, and then backward to make a bit of what I thought would look like a cool metallic skyline. Now, what do you think? And after what I thought was a disastrous start to this pour, I think things turned out really well. I'm quite happy with how this pour turned out. And the metallics, again, are one of my favorites, I think, of all the colors I use now. So I may keep up with this theme for a while, so if you can, bear with me. And no, this one was fun. It wound up being a great piece, so I'm glad it worked out. But again, I was really concerned to begin with on how it started out. Now here's a bit of a wet look afterwards. So here is what I think is the best part for me, is the copper and blue, we'll call it skyline, that turned out after all. So after again, a poor beginning, the end result turned out great. I love the lacing in the black ivory, which again looked really good as a base coat. I really enjoyed this piece and hope you did too. So if you enjoyed this video, thanks again for being here, and click this playlist next to watch a few more.